King Gray is the strongest king in history. Although he possessed unparalleled power and wealth, there is no one who stands by his side. One day, he meets his death and is reincarnated as a powerless infant named Arthur in a world of magic. Arthur then starts to experience joy in his new life, surrounded by loving family and companions. This is the story of King Gray's second life, filled with love and adventure. A fierce battle was ongoing, and King Gray emerged victorious. He then sent his fighter jets to destroy the town in the same way America attacked Iraq. However, he suddenly died in his house, and his eyes opened to see a man and woman staring at him much like an art exhibition. He quickly came to realize that they were his parents, and he had another name. As the days went on, his body betrayed him much like a baby's, and he couldn't do anything but watch as he was manhandled with his bare butt out for all to see. He became familiar with the world of magic, as his mother and father were magicians. They also had some of their companions from previous work with them. Months passed, and King Gray, now named Arthur, was able to walk, and he could finally see his reflection in the mirror. He then began sneaking around the house to find useful information about the new world of Dicathan and the several races that lived there. He also got information about the magic systems of the world and the different ways they could apply mana, a form of magic similar to the one in his former world called Kai. He then began to cultivate it, but was interrupted by his body releasing waste and his mom changing his diaper. The next day, his father began to show him how to handle a stick like a sword, and his mom nagged his ears off. Soon after, they went into the main city where he saw different people and magic forms, much different from his former world where he was an orphan and had to join the military to survive. Days passed, and Arthur's father was showing off his martial and magic skills, which left him amazed. Just as his mother wanted to lay him down for a nap, he used his cute anime face to convince her to let him read instead. He then continued his mana gathering by meditation, and he took the pose of a Chinese monk with his parents cooling off outside. However, an explosion rocked the house, and his parents thought they were being attacked by terrorists from the Middle East. They ran inside to find Arthur floating like a DC superhero and were surprised at his intellect. They all hugged, and his parents cried for joy at their son's safety. After the accident, Arthur's father got him his own gloves so that they can have matching equipment, but Arthur chose a wooden sword instead. They then began their training on how to use mana while fighting. Soon enough, his father figured that they needed to hire a proper teacher for him, but his mother was too clingy to even agree to the idea. Arthur, with his years of former world experience, offered a third solution, which they readily agreed. Days after, his parents' companions from the Twin Horn Party arrived, and Arthur was almost suffocated by the plots of one of the members. He greeted the rest of the party, and they soon set off to the big city Xyrus in search of a suitable tutor for Arthur. They made camp by the roadside at the end of the day, and everyone rested, but they were soon attacked by wild beasts. They were able to defeat the beasts with poor animation and special effect noises. Later that night, as they ate and rested by the fire, one of the Twin Horns requested for a practice duel with Arthur, a very unequal match between a middle-aged man and a 3-year-old boy. However, Arthur was able to hold his own with magic, and even parried a few attacks before being blown away with sheer strength. Soon after, morning came, and the party continued their journey after a few hours training and doing the typical gym bro routine of working out. This led to a few uneventful days of training and raveling. Arthur's birthday soon arrived, and he got a gift from one of the quiet party members. They soon got to the mountainous part of the journey and were ambushed by bandits. They attacked, and the party set to fight with the help of poor animation, while Arthur and his mother stayed in the wagon. As the fight progressed, his father was injured, and it was at that time that Arthur found out that he was going to be a big brother. He tried to escape with his mother, but the bandits chased after them. However, one of the bandit mages shot at them, and he pushed his mother out of the way. The attack hit him, and he fell off the cliff while also taking the bandit mage with him. He contemplated his short life in this new world as he fell. Arthur awoke in the forest below, surprised that he survived. He couldn't say the same for the bandit mage. He wandered around until he found a cave and came face to face with a menacing monster with red eyes and 6 horns like monsters from Greek mythology. He tried to attack, but the monster swatted him down like a mosquito and then spoke to him in a soft voice. She even offered him some of the fruits to eat, which he gratefully ate like a growing boy. He asked about his parents and was happy to see that they were safe, even though they left him for dead. The next few days were filled with Arthur eating and sleeping, while the monster named Sylvia prepared a portal for him to go home. Arthur took some time while awake to train and develop his mana core. Seeing that he already had a mana core, Sylvia offered to teach him one of her techniques, only on the condition that he use the power for good and protect the ones he loved. His training began, and he was able to achieve it on the first try. However, Sylvia quickly hit him just as another monster similar to Sylvia appeared and attacked her. To protect herself, she transformed into her true form, which was a dragon, and charged up her Megazord Dragon Blast to attack the newcomer. Before the attacker could launch a counterattack, Sylvia used her version of the Time Stone to freeze time and open a portal for Arthur. She then gave him an egg and a piece of her feathers alongside some instant tattoos on his arms. Their parting was tearful, and Arthur screamed as he entered the portal. She unfroze time and finished a battle, but she took fatal damage. She said her final words to Arthur in the portal, and as she died, he appeared in a remote part of the woods. Just as he was getting his bearing in the woods, he heard a loud, shrill scream. He went to investigate and found that some bandits had abducted an elf girl who was planning on selling her into slavery. He waited till night to attack. He first distracted the animals and unalived the first two people sent to investigate. He was soon discovered and had to face off against the leader mage who used his fists much like the Hulk would. He was able to take him down with cunning, and he saved the damsel in distress. He covered the body so that she wouldn't have to see them, and was about to leave when the girl manipulated him into escorting her to the elf kingdom. As they left, they set free the animals bound with magic, which then ran off into the woods. They began the journey with Arthur, acting like a gentleman. The girl introduced herself as Tessia, while Arthur made some beef stew for them to eat. As they walked, Arthur asked about her life in the elf kingdom, and Tessia was very forthcoming. Night soon came and they made camp, and Arthur was on guard, but Tessia was scared of the dark and wouldn't sleep alone because of monsters that might be in the tent. The next day, they continued their journey and crossed different streams and waterfalls on their way. As the journey progressed, Arthur began to feel a sharp pain from his mana core, but he didn't want to worry her. As he laid down to rest, one of the animals they freed brought a freshly killed animal for them to eat, and Tessia chalked it up to them being good to the animals. The next day, their wanderings came to an end, as they soon came to a glowing green portal, which Dr. Strange could have stepped out from. Tessia immediately dragged him into the portal, and they entered the elf kingdom. Just as they appeared, Arthur was handcuffed by armed guards and was introduced to the cruel concept of elf police brutality. Just as he was about to be cruelly executed, Tessia protested, and the officer twisted it to mean that he brainwashed her. Just then, an old man with some resemblance to Jiraiya appeared and ordered them to stop. He introduced himself as Virion, the former elf king and Tessia's grandpa. This new information made Arthur realize that he rescued a princess, something he didn't expect at all from someone like her. Her parents soon arrived, and her father shouted that Arthur be arrested, but Tessia stopped them again. She then dragged Arthur to see the city while the royal family promised that they would speak later. The kingdom was not like what Arthur imagined, but he was busy thinking about his mana pain and his parents to fully concentrate. They soon got to the palace and Tessia ordered the best of everything for Arthur, but he decided to have the royal meeting first before any other activities. The meeting turned out to be a mini tea party thanks to Tessia. After the introductions, Arthur conducted himself with the highest conduct that his former self would be proud. He explained all the events that led him to the forest to rescue Tessia and how they found their way back. They were surprised that such a small boy was able to dispatch multiple grown men and had a hard time even believing it. In the end, the king believed him. Arthur asked for safe passage to the human kingdom as payment, but the king was adamant. In the end, Tessia used her mean, girly anime face to convince him. He offered him escort home, and Arthur was pleased. Meanwhile, the mana pain wouldn't stop and became very frequent. After he thought of his parents and how they were doing. Later that night, Arthur met Tessia in the palace grounds. As they were talking, Arthur felt a chill presence throw something, and he immediately reacted with a flying kick. He then found out that it was Virion who had tricked him into showing his skills. Tessia tried to defend Arthur, but Virion came for another purpose. He challenged Arthur to a duel, and they began fighting. Arthur was able to land a blow with the help of mana and poor animation style, which surprised Virion. However, before they began the second round, Tessia attacked with a vicious pinch to the buttocks. Virion then offered Arthur the chance to be his apprentice. He was skeptical, as his parents didn't know that he was alive, but Virion offered a solution. Just then, the mana pain shot up, and Virion told him that it was a beast will which he had inherited. The mana pain became more frequent, and it even appeared in his dreams as his greatest fear. Just then, he was jolted from sleep by Tessia, who was a morning person which he wasn't. He got dressed while Tessia gave him a nerve-wrenching pinch on his spine. As they prepared for the impromptu trip, Tessia's parents tried to convince Virion not to take a human as an apprentice as it was against the elf traditions, but he didn't agree. Soon after, Tessia and Arthur arrived, and they began the trip to the mysterious friend. On their way, Arthur struck up a conversation with Virion while Tessia slept on his shoulder. Virion then gave a backstory to Tessia's background and her sheltered life growing up. He then appreciated him for bringing her back to them. They soon arrived at their destination, which was a small hut at the outskirts of the village. Virion then went on to boot the door shouting. The occupant came out shouting insults, and Virion introduced her as Renia, a friend with special powers. She welcomed them in, and the house was much bigger than it looked, much like a typical Harry Potter sorcerer. They then sat down seance style, and Renia explained her powers as a diviner. She then tried to look into him but couldn't see much. Renia then told him to stare into the water and think of his parents. Few moments passed, and Arthur saw them sat at the table about to eat. It was coincidentally his birthday, and they made his favorite meal while they remembered all that happened when the bandits attacked them. They reached Xyrus City and parted ways with the Twin Horns. Then they found accommodation and jobs. Just as they were about to eat, they heard Arthur's voice in their heads, informing them that he was all right and was in the Elf Kingdom. He then told them not to blame themselves for what happened and to look forward to seeing him soon. They fell in each other's arms and cried, while Arthur also cried into the water, adding to the previous tears in the water. Later that day, Tessia's parents grudgingly agreed for Arthur to stay, and Virion took responsibility for him. He then welcomed Arthur formally as his father's first human apprentice. Tessia used that moment to test the boundary and ask for playing time in the town, which he agreed to. Moments after, Tessia was all dressed up for the playdate. On their way, they bumped into a royal elf boy who played the part of the Bullywell, complete with the lackeys behind him. However, Arthur was used to dealing with bullies and was able to use sarcasm to disarm him. But the bully was not to be fooled and challenged him to a duel which Arthur had to accept due to the eyes of the surrounding villagers. Tessia officiated, and as soon as she dropped her hand, the bully attacked, and Arthur won the duel with just one punch to the face. Seeing this, Tessia took his hand and ran away to experience the rest of the village. When they got back, Virion and Arthur began their master-apprentice agreement. Arthur began his training under Virion, and Tessia joined as a sparring partner. The next morning, Virion began the lesson with a quick revision of the mana systems available: fire, water, wind, and earth. He explained the different elements unique to each race. He also explained the concept of a beast like the one inside Arthur, but Tessia used that to make fun of him as he was in the same class as Naruto. Virion then began the mana assimilation by jump-starting Arthur's mana core like a broken-down Peugeot. The process pushed them back like when Naruto activated the Kyuubi for the first time, and Arthur passed out immediately. He woke up with Virion keeping watch. He asked him where his beast will came from, and he told him that it was from a dragon. They then swore an oath of silence between them like monks. Virion then informed him that his departure was set for 4 months from now due to an emergency meeting between races. Later that night, as Arthur was sleeping, the object that Sylvia gave him began to crack, and he was surprised that it was an egg. It broke, and out of it came a dragon which immediately fell down. They stared at each other like mimes, and Arthur had to admit that it was cute. Just then, the dragon bit him, and he screamed. After the pain subsided, Arthur heard the baby dragon's voice in his head. Unfortunately, they didn't think of the viewer when animating, so we couldn't hear. That was how Arthur became a father at 8. The next morning, Tessia discovered the newborn and immediately dragged it out of bed. After many attempts, the dragon finally broke free and ran to her papa's arms. The newborn was surprising to Virion, and he almost had a heart attack. The class for the day now centered on combat, and Virion activated his own version of Black Panther aura. Arthur had to surrender, as he couldn't keep up with his speed, and it was his first time seeing the form. Weeks passed, and the 4 months were complete. Arthur and Tessia had a mini picnic the night before he left, just for old time's sake. The next morning, Arthur found that some elves were also going to the human world as exchange students from Elf America. Tessia didn't want him to go, and she cried in his arms like a peasant lady. Arthur reassured her and told her that she would soon come and join him in his world. After arriving at the floating city Xyrus, Arthur said his goodbyes to the young elves. Then he headed straight to a huge mansion. When he knocked on the door, he was greeted by a cute little kid. That's when Arthur finally reunited with his parents and told them he was home. Alice could barely believe it was him. They rushed to hug the kid. Arthur thought it was a little weird when the girl told his mom not to cry, and he realized that this was the sister he'd heard about before they got separated. So the girl was already super happy to meet her Oni-chan. Barely had Arthur even arrived when Alice started throwing a million questions at him. Had he been cured of the disease? Was he hungry? It was more like an interrogation, and she told Eleanor, "This is the older brother we always talk about when we go to bed." After that, Arthur shared everything that happened to him, except for meeting Sylvia. He said he survived the fall by sheer luck, using magic unconsciously, and said the disease wouldn't come back, since it only showed up due to the unstable monocore from awakening too early. He was flexing hard. Ray asked who that dog was, and the protagonist says he found it in an abandoned monobeast nest. So he decided to adopt Sylvie. Reynolds tried to hold back, but couldn't. He was dying to know what stage his son's monocore was at. But Alice wasn't too thrilled with him comparing himself to a kid. Ray says he's working at the Hellstee auction house as an instructor for the security team. Kinda ironic for someone who couldn't even protect his own kid from bandits, huh? Arthur was surprised to learn that his dad's mana core was at the dark orange stage. That's because mana color grows in this order: black, red, orange, yellow, silver, and white. And it evolves from dark, standard, to light, and he had to train his butt off to reach this stage. So, he asked again, "What stage is Arthur at?" He flipped when he found out it was light red, just one level below his, and he was already ready to rush outside for some training. Out of nowhere, a four-eyed guy came rushing in, asking if it was true his son was alive. Reynolds introduces him as Vincent Hellstea, the auction house administrator and his boss. Arthur was about to introduce himself, but was so polite that Vincent didn't believe he was Reynolds' son. Also with them was Vincent's daughter Lilia, who was sulking until she saw Sylvie and fell in love at first sight. Ray says, "This is the Hellstee house," and the boss was surprised when he found out they were going to do a training battle. He asked Alice if it was a joke that Arthur's mana core was light red, but she said, unbelievably, it was true. Vincent says that even the prodigies at Xyrus Academy have trouble reaching deep red. Arthur realized it was better not to mention he hadn't evolved more because he stopped training when he absorbed Sylvia's will. After a lot of back and forth, they finally went at it. Arthur dodged all of his dad's punches, who wasn't letting up and was blocking the kid's hits, but was shocked when he saw how strong the kid was. He said, "Now I'm going serious." Chugged some gasoline and started burning up. Now Arthur couldn't block the punches or he'd end up getting burned, but he kept charging and the crew was shook, especially after he started going all out. And he started glowing like a firefly. Reynolds tells him to get lost, but the kid's back at it in no time. Then he remembers Virion saying how much he improved with his fire element, and now it was time to level up. So Arthur turns into Pikachu and starts blasting Thunderbolt everywhere. But he says it's not the time for Reynolds to be amazed yet, because he also used the fountain water to put out his dad's fiery butt. And Ray's so proud, he says Arthur learned something amazing. He was already dying to know everything he's learned. The Hellstees were in disbelief, saying this kid's a prodigy, and Lilia was practically drooling just watching the kid's strength. Vincent says Arthur has a bright future ahead. But Reynolds says he knew that ever since Arthur awakened at 3 and blew up the house. He laughed so hard he even forgot he was still sore from the fight. Vincent asks if he wants to enroll Arthur in Xyrus Academy, which is basically the top academy on the continent. Thabita says they'd love to invest in Arthur's future, so they don't need to worry about the tuition fees. Alice says it's really kind of them, but she thinks the school won't accept a kid who's only 8 years old. But Vincent starts flexing, saying he knows the academy's director and can get him a spot. Then Arthur says it's been a while since he saw his family, so he'd like to spend some time with them. He says he's tired after the training fight and needs to take a rest. Then Lilia pops up saying if he goes that way, he'll get lost in the basement, and she invites the kid to hang out in her room. Just kidding. She's going to introduce Arthur to the mansion staff, and the gardener asks if this is the kid who set the garden on fire that he spends so much time taking care of. They all laugh, and Lilia asks for duck meat, but the old lady tells her to be careful or she'll turn into a whale. One of the maids tells Arthur that Lilia comes here when she's stressed out, and she says Lilia's parents really want her to awaken as a sorceress, even though they're not sorcerers themselves. At night, Arthur's parents couldn't stop talking about how much he's grown, but he's still their beautiful little boy. Ray's sure that one day the kid's gonna be the world's greatest sorcerer. The next day, the Twin Horns crew visits, and Angela runs up to hug Arthur and nearly suffocates him with magical balloons. Lucky kid. The others say he's grown a lot, but Jasmine wants to know if his other parts grown too. After that, they start talking about all their adventures, and Arthur realizes he knows almost nothing about the kingdom of Dickathan and Sapin, so becoming an adventurer might not be such a bad idea. The next day, Arthur was out here playing with time and space, but he was disappointed because he only managed to hold it for a few seconds. But he had to master this power to protect the ones he loves. Then he tried to give Sylvie a hug, but noticed she smelled like a dumpster fire. So he decided to give the dragon a bath so the mansion didn't start smelling like a garbage dump. And he realized that the Hellstay family makes a killing with their auction house. Arthur finished drying Sylvie off and said, "Now you look fancy." Then his fan club rolled up, saying it was his turn to look fancy. They took him to a beauty salon, where a girl with 3 legs promised to make him look smokin'. When he came back with his new haircut, all the girls were swooning over him. Arthur asked, "What's all this for?" And Thabita said, "We're taking you to check out the auction house. It's such a prestigious place that even royalty pops in sometime." And he couldn't show up looking like a hobo. Eleanor was about to take her brother out for a walk, but Lilia was already turning green with jealousy. She started throwing some serious moves on the kid. They took a few spins around the city and played a game of tying a ribbon on the king's statue, until some punks came up and started messing with him. Lilia says they're students from Xyrus Academy, and wearing that uniform is like being royalty. Arthur wonders why they want him to join that preppy school. But then, out of nowhere, feels a weird presence and starts eyeing a jewelry store. Thabita says those are beast cores taken from mana beasts. They boost the power of whoever uses them. Arthur's shocked, thinking you can buy and sell that stuff. Elves don't usually do that. She says if the core comes with beastly will, it's worth at least 100 gold coin, which is enough to live for 250 years in their land. The hot girl says Arthur can check out the mana cores at the auction, but he's already happy with the beast he has. Lilia tries to make a suggestion, but her mom says having a mana core isn't a shortcut to awakening as a sorceress. Plus, it's way too expensive for a kid. Lilia says some cheaper ones are sold in weapon shops, but Thabita ignores her and leaves her talking to herself. Out of nowhere, Lilia disappears when they stop for some tea. She heads to a store, saying she can buy one with her allowance. Arthur pops up behind her asking if she's really going to buy it, since just having it doesn't guarantee she'll be able to use magic. But she says if she doesn't try, she'll never know. She's had a lot of failures in life, so one more won't shake her, says the rich heir living in a mansion. Arthur realizes she feels pressured by him being a prodigy while she doesn't know how to do anything. Then, out of nowhere, Lilia trips and bumps into some Xyrus Academy student. They immediately start talking trash, saying an apology isn't enough and asking who they think they are. The store owner pops up to ask what's going on, but as soon as he sees they're from the academy, he backs down and tells them to make themselves at home. The jerks ask how they're gonna have fun now. Arthur starts activating magic to defend himself, but Thabita shows up just in time and tells them to cancel their powers. The old man yells that they're academy students and you can't mess with them or they'll destroy his store. But the woman says that's nothing compared to what'll happen if the daughter of the Hellsteys gets hurt. After that, the punks were shocked to find out she's a Hellstey, because her family donates a lot of money to the academy. So they decide to leave and start roasting Lilia, saying she can't even afford a spot at the academy and will have to buy her way in. Arthur was about to throw hands, but Lilia told him to let it slide. Back at the mansion, Vincent was shocked to hear about the fight with the academy students. Alice said she was more worried about the students. Vincent tells them not to worry, because it won't stop Arthur from getting into the academy. Lilia asks if he plans to send Arthur in her place since she's useless and still can't use magic, and screams she hates her dad and Arthur. That night, Arthur tried to invite the brat to dinner, but she ignored him. Then Lilia remembers when her dad told her he'd put her in the academy when she grew up. She said they made lots of donations, so there would definitely be a spot for her. But then they said the same thing to Arthur, who found Lilia in her corner, ready to apologize. But she's the one who apologized for being jealous. She says it's her fault she hasn't awakened yet. Arthur holds her head and says it's not true, because he knows how hard she's working. He tells her about Tessia, who cheered him on when he was separated from his parents, and says her dad's curiosity is the same as Eleanor's because he showed up out of nowhere. Then Lilia starts laughing, saying her dad just wants what's best for her, and she started feeling the pressure all on her own. Arthur asks if she really wants to learn magic. Then Vincent shows up, freaking out, because Arthur said Lilia ran off. He says he sent her to the place where he was to awaken her magic. But Vincent gets mad, because he did it without asking him first. Arthur says it's what she wanted and she didn't have the guts to ask them. He hands over a letter saying that until she can use magic, she'll just be a burden to them. But she promised she'd become a great sorceress and come back to them. The Four Eyes drops to his knees, saying it's all his fault for telling her being a sorceress would give her a happy future. But even without magic, Lilia is still his beloved daughter. Then Arthur asks if she heard that, and the girl comes out from behind the door, fooling everyone. Arthur says, "That's exactly what I said." They both apologize for lying, but they all realize they were wrong. Vincent apologizes for trying to send Reynolds and Alice's son to the academy when he just got back. Then he says Lilia doesn't need to go to the academy because he'll love her just the same. But this time she wants to go to the academy, to become a sorceress who makes everyone happy. Then Arthur says he's going to awaken Lilia's mana, and everyone's shook because they didn't get it. Thabita is like, "Wait, what? I've never heard of this before." Arthur says the first step is breathing. He tells them to close their eyes and look for a light in the darkness. Eleanor barely saw it for a second, but Lilia couldn't see anything. Then Arthur places his hand on their backs, and Lilia starts seeing all these beautiful lights. Her parents couldn't believe it. After that, they all went to celebrate, and the old cook even brought a fatty duck because she deserves it. Arthur says it might take 2 or 3 years for her energy to stabilize, but if she keeps working hard every day, she'll definitely make it. She wonders what element she'll end up using. But Arthur laughs at her because she'll never be like him, using multiple elements. After that, a carriage arrived, accompanied by a troop of knights, and a guy in a hood asks, "Is there anything fun for me at the auction house?" And the episode ends. Bro, if you're loving this anime and want me to bring the next episode as soon as it drops, drop a dragon in the comments. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so we can hit 1 million subs by the end of the year. Also, check out the next video on the screen. It's fire! I'm out of here. Peace and see ya!